So it says increased anxiety, trouble sleeping, changes in bowel movements, dry mouth, headaches, dizziness, and decreased libido. So yeah.
Headache, mood swings.
Yeah.
Well, when people start watching this podcast, there'll be even more of a shortage.
So welcome to episode 82 of Farm to Markets. This is the show where participants only get 5 minutes to state their opinions, and the person with the most time at the end wins, but there are no prizes. Today we are talking about if the Fed will pause rate hikes, reparations, tips at self-checkout, prison debates, and dominant features. All right. So inflation eased slightly in April for the 10th straight month of cooling, but prices again remain historically high as the broader economy cools. The consumer price index rose 4.9% in April from a year earlier, the Labor Department said on Wednesday, down slightly from March's 5% increase. The inflation reading has eased from a recent peak of 9.1% in June 2022. Do you think this is enough for the Federal Reserve to pause its interest rate hikes?
Well, yeah, for now, I think so. What they've signaled in the past is that rates with the last one and now with this another quarter of a percentage point rate increase, they're pretty much right in the range where they want them to be. They've signaled in the past that they want to see what CPI does over the summer with rates right around 5 to 5.25% for their interest rate. So I think for now they will probably leave it as is for a few months. I think what everybody's kind of looking out for is whether or not there will actually be a recession later this year or early next. And if so, they may actually even start cutting rates. I saw this morning that market bets are for rate cuts, or at least those bets are growing for later this year. So I don't know if we'll see that or not, but sorry, the phone's going off. But I think for now they're going to leave them where they are, see what CPI does and what the labor market does over the summer, and then reassess probably fall.
I think it's probable that the Fed is going to start backing off on their interest rate hikes. I don't know if this is going to happen at the next open market committee meeting or maybe a few meetings down the road, but I think that will probably soon see the Fed maintain its current target funds rate without any increases. They're not going to decrease. I don't think they're going to start cutting rates, but they'll probably just assess for a while and do nothing. So obviously the Fed's been on a rate hiking spree over the last year. And I think you mentioned, Tom, they raised their target rate for pretty much 0% to over 5% over the last 10 meetings. So this has been a very rapid increase, and it takes a while for these interest rates to fully absorb into the economy. It's kind of like steering a cruise ship. You stop turning before the ship is fully turned, so you don't oversteer. Well, the Fed steered in the direction they want to go, and I think their next move is just to wait and let the ship keep moving toward the bearing that they've set. Remember, the Fed operates under their dual mandate, which is to keep prices stable and to maximize employment. Employment is looking pretty good right now, and inflation is trending downward. So I think the safest bet for the Fed is just to sit back and monitor and see what happens from here.
I'm not so sure the drop in inflation numbers, because inflation is still there. It's just less inflation than it was before. So it's at 4.9%. That's still pretty high from year to year. I think that the primary reason why the Fed's going to pause raising interest rates is because they just didn't realize how much of an impact this was going to have on the banking system. And right now you've got a bunch of banks that the Fed allowed to do really, really stupid things with other people's money. And those banks are imploding. Those three major California banks who went into receivership primarily for doing the exact opposite of what they teach you in your first year of finance classes in college. You don't buy long bonds long, and then when short-term interest rates rise, you get squeezed. And yet the Fed allowed them to do it. So I think that the banking scare is really what's causing the Fed to rethink raising interest rates.
Well, haven't they raised rates 2 times since since Signature Bank or SVB first failed?
They did.
100%.
Yeah, last two meetings.
They,
But
they,
anyway,
they did. And I was going to say, my point was going to be that they will probably not now, because inflation's cooling enough where they can help their friends over at the FDIC not, because the FDIC is probably running out of interim CEOs to come take over all these banks. So I think that the fact that inflation, even slightly, I mean, it's still high, but it's down a ways from 9.1%. It's headed in the right direction, and probably enough where the Federal Reserve is just be like, we're just gonna hold here until we can find some more interim CEOs to take over all these regional banks. So my guess is that they're absolutely going to hold for now, and unless inflation starts coming back up again. All right.
I think you got some bonus seconds on that one, Tom.
What's that?
I think you got some bonus seconds on that one.
Yeah, for sure. Sorry, the baby in the background is just killing me.
Can you hear her or just see her?
No, it's like sometimes she'll just turn, just like face the camera, just like look directly into it.
Yeah.
There's like sometimes there's like cat paws or like baby limbs that enter the screen.
Yeah, do some zoom ins there.
Yeah.
All right. So the next question is: so a 9-member committee created by Governor Gavin Newsom of California and his Democratic legislature voted Saturday to recommend that the state make cash payments to Black Americans who claim to be descendants of slaves. All told, as many as 2 million Black Californians could be eligible, and the total cost could be as much as $1.2 million per person, and a total of $800 billion overall. How likely do you think this is actually? I mean, do you think this is actually going to pass? And how do you think? I think they're going to pay for it.
So first of all, this was kind of a really stupid thing for them to do, because now they've backed themselves into a corner. They made promises that, we might pay you guys reparations. Now the committee's recommended it. I'd be surprised if the legislature passed it. And the governor, I think this morning or yesterday evening, signaled he did not support this. So now you've gotten, a segment of the population all riled up because they think they're about to get paid, and there's a pretty good chance that they won't. I think this at the higher end, 1.2 million per person, there's no chance that this is going to happen. The less money they decide to pay out, the more likely I see it being, so if they said we're going to give everybody, $5,000, maybe there's a pretty good chance something like that happens. As far as how will they pay for it? Through taxes. Pretty much that simple. I think Newsom, though, is signaling he's not really in support of these payments because both the price tag is going to be ridiculous. It's anywhere from tens to hundreds of billions of dollars. But in addition, he's got higher aspirations than occupying the governor's mansion in Sacramento. So I don't think he wants to be seen as too radical to the general public in the United States. Because when Biden's done, whenever that is, Newsom is one of those people who gets talked about as a potential next Democrat star for the presidential election. So I don't think it's very likely, especially with a higher price tag. That being said, the more money they're going to promise to pay out, the more Californians you should be ready to receive if you're a state west of the Mississippi River. So whether you like it or not, get ready for a lot more Californians to show up if they pass something along these lines.
I wonder if the opposite is true, if we'll see a bunch of slave descending Americans go to California if it does get passed. But to focus on the question, who's going to pay for it? Obviously, taxpayers. That was pretty simple. Will it get passed? Probably not in its current form. There's a lot of open-ended questions. That's a huge price tag. It's already ruffling a bunch of feathers. I could see it being changed quite a few times in some form of it getting passed, as social welfare or some kind of reparation program. But right now, absolutely not. This is ridiculous policy. Remember, public policy that's designed to alleviate inequality also alleviates the consequences of bad decision making. So giving out checks, just handing out these $1 million checks is not going to reduce crime in Black neighborhoods. It's not going to teach kids how to read and write in impoverished school districts, and it's not going to reduce the, I think it's 70% rate of Black children being born to unwed mothers. So this is just California throwing money at the problem and then calling themselves morally superior. It's not going to work. I don't think it's gonna do anything to narrow that inequality gap. And this really isn't a new idea. The idea of non-slave descendant Americans paying reparations to slave descending Americans goes back to even the 1960s. In the mid 1960s, I think it was President Lyndon Johnson. He was pursuing these redistribution programs to right the racial wrongs of the past. And he described the situation as someone towing the line of a foot race that had been shackled their whole lives, and then the gun goes off, and it's obviously an unfair competition to the slaves. Now, he's not entirely wrong. A person that was shackled for years would be at a disadvantage in that particular foot race, but the fallacy is assuming that giving the unshackled person a bicycle is basically telling them they're a fast runner. It doesn't make them a fast runner, it just gives them a bicycle. So this is essentially what they're trying to do. It's bad policy. I don't think it's gonna work at all.
If California was its own nation, it'd be the 5th largest economy in the world behind Germany and India. This is what happens when you have lots and lots of wealth held in a few hands, and they use that extra wealth to buy votes. And you don't always get great outcomes. I don't think it's going to pass, primarily because I just don't think there's enough Hispanics, Asians, and Caucasian Californians, even in the state legislature, who are going to vote to see this through. While it's extremely popular in the Black community, this reparation thing does not poll very well in non-Black communities. So as strange and odd as California tends to vote, I think this is one where it's probably going to go down in flames, because at some point, people who weren't slave owners are going to feel a little bit put out to have to pay taxes for people who weren't slaves.
It's almost a disservice to people who might be eligible for this, because you're basically putting something out there that they're never going to get. Because even if people wanted to pay reparations to them, it's some of the proposals I was looking at, it's not affordable. Like, California cannot do like an $800 billion bill spread over however many years it would take to do this. They just can't do it. They have so many other things they're spending money on. Like, at some point, the money isn't there to support something like this. And then you're going to get exactly what Alex said. You're going to get a flight of everybody that owes this money and is never going to see it out of California. And you're probably going to see people who would qualify for this flow into California. And now you have more people receiving the money than you do paying into it. And it's just not going to work. So it'd be better to just not waive this in front of people who might be eligible to it, because it's just not a realistic thing that's going to happen. Yeah, and then just paying for it in general. I mean, if California wants to try it, I think there's another bill in San Francisco that's saying that reparations should be paid in the amount of $97,000 per year. And if they want to do it in San Francisco, I say go ahead and do it, and then the rest of the world can watch and see what actually happens to it. But on a national level, when you can't even pay for Social Security, you don't have the budget to pay reparations to people.
A few of the questions I have on this is how African American must you be to receive that check? Do all Americans have to pay reparations, or just whites and non-blacks? Would someone who is a little bit Black have to pay for their own reparations? Would this be income based? Because I can think of a lot of poor whites and a lot of rich African Americans. Would the payment of mixed race be pro rata based on your percentage of Black, white in your ancestry? The final question, I guess, above all is, would this finally settle the inequality issue in California? After those checks are written and issued, are whites free from their guilt, and are blacks made whole? These are questions just asked purely economically, but I'm just curious.
There was a study that came out right after the COVID checks had been sent out that found that the COVID checks had no material impact on people's lives for the cohort that they studied. And my guess is this would be similar. Is that if you pass out free money to people who are eligible to it, is that most likely it's going to be expensive, and you're not going to see a material difference in people's lives because of it. So.
I think we're going to, if it passed, which I don't think it will, I think we're going to see what happens when an entire community goes through sudden wealth syndrome. It's like people that get the lottery.
Yeah.
Is that they can't handle that infusion of cash so rapidly that they end up having all sorts of social and psychological and even physical problems.
Well, like I said, just giving people money doesn't teach them how to make good decisions at all.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say, sorry for the clock issues, but I think you gotta flip through me anyways. But it's the same thing in professional sports, is that some of these guys who are drafted to the NFL like at a high school or I guess probably out of college, all of a sudden they're making millions of dollars in like a couple of months. And the NFL had to start like offering financial classes to these athletes because they were so irresponsible with the sudden wealth that they had. I mean, they were buying cars and like houses and just blowing the money, and that there was like some staggering percentage of them ended up like close to bankrupt, by the end of their professional career because they were just so irresponsible with the money. So if you're going to give, I mean, at least if all the stars align and this actually does work out, you at least have to give people, you have to have some sort of like financial fitness so that we're not just going to squander the money. I mean, I guess it gets spent in the economy, which might be a good thing, but if to actually help these people, we need to make sure they're not just hit what Joe said, the sudden wealth effect.
Well, right. If for the most part what they end up buying is consumer products, even if they're bigger ones like cars or expensive TVs, I mean, at a certain point, if they're just blowing it on stuff, then like Drew alluded to, and I think you too, Tom, this isn't really going to have a long-term positive effect on anybody's life. So probably just a waste of money ultimately.
Okay, so we'll go on to the third question. So zero interaction with employees during a transaction no longer guarantees freedom from the moral quandary of how much to tip. Prompts to leave 20% at self-checkout machines at airports, stadiums, cookie shops, which I thought was weird that was brought up, and then cafes across the country are causing some consumers to be inundated by the proliferation of tip screens. Business owners say the automated queues can significantly increase gratuities and boost staff pay, but the unmanned prompts are leading more customers to question what exactly the tips are for. Do you tip when you go through a self-checkout kiosk?
I've never encountered this option before, but if I do, the answer is going to be absolutely not. I mean, if I'm the one doing the shopping, like at the grocery store or something, if I go and pick the things off the shelf, put them in the cart, scan them, bag them, swipe the card, I'm not going to tip a darn thing. No way.
Same. I don't even know where the tips are going at that point. If I have an interaction with a human and I use the pad to put in my card and stuff, I'll still tip, every single time. But if there's no human interaction, absolutely not.
I pay a tip when I'm entertained and I feel good. If I see a prompt to pay a tip where a no service was rendered, I'm already feeling bad. So the answer is no.
I wouldn't, especially at the grocery store when I use the self-checkout. I never tip the grocery checker anyways, and I'm pretty sure at Safeway they're all union covered and can't accept tips anyways. So I don't know why I would tip the self-checkout kiosk. It doesn't make any sense.
There's a few restaurants I really like. Qdoba, they're not allowed to accept cash tips, so I accidentally leave like a $5 bill on the counter, and be like, oh, geez, I forgot my money. I'm kind of like with you, Dad. When you have a good experience, you really like the service, you really like the product, then yeah, tip. But I'm out of time anyway, so.
All right. So in 2015, the Harvard debate team lost a match to the Bard College Eastern Correctional Facility debate team. The Eastern Correctional Facility maximum security prison in upstate New York enrolls about 325 men in the Bard Prison Initiative, which allows prisoners to take college classes, and about 20 of the 325 take part in the debate team. Do you think? What do you think about prisoners being allowed to participate in debates? And are you surprised that they beat the Harvard team?
I think if you believe that justice should be rehabilitative, I'm not surprised that they have a program like this. A lot of prisoners will get college degrees, that kind of thing, while they're serving their sentences. So it doesn't surprise me that they have a debate team, or that they participate in a debate. Am I surprised that they won? Also, not really. If you've got a lot of free time on your hands, it's not like the prisoners are doing much of anything else. So I'm not surprised that they won if they have a lot of practice, minimal distractions. I can understand why they did well. Also, am I surprised they beat Harvard? Not really. Harvard has, in recent years, gone less the meritocratic route and more the diversity, equity, and inclusion route. So I'm curious if their talent pool has been lessened because they'd rather pick people based on physical appearance rather than skill at debates. So maybe that played into it a little bit too.
I've been canceled, so go on to.
I am not surprised that the Eastern New York Correctional Facility beat the Harvard debate team. I think it was William F. Buckley who stated that he'd preferred having the 400 first names in the Boston phone directory govern the United States than the Harvard faculty. So I think he needs to change the quote now to I prefer the Eastern Correctional Facility debate team over the Harvard faculty.
No, I'm totally in agreement with Alex's point. Is that what else do they have to do during the day? Like people at Harvard, you probably have nonprofit organizations. You probably have clubs you're in. You have a social life. You have family you're going to go see. But when you're in prison, what else are you going to do? I mean, this is what you do to kill time during the day. So of course they won. But they actually did a follow-up debate, and Harvard actually beat the correctional team. But I mean, come on, and they have a lot of time. I don't think anybody should be surprised that they won. So. All right, last question here is that the financial industry experts and analysis peers are more. So a study found that financial industry experts and analysis peers are more willing to share information with male analysts whose faces are perceived as dominant, according to the study done by the University of California, Los Angeles. The study concluded that the analysts with the more dominant features have more accurate earnings forecasts than analysts with facial features less associated with dominance. Do you think this is true?
Canceled, so I'm no comment.
Canceled.
Just you and me up, Tom.
Yeah.
I found the study interesting. Is that's true for male analysts. Male dominant features actually had more accurate forecasts, but females who had dominant features actually had less perfect or less successful forecasts. So it's really sex related. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to hire female forecasters who don't have dominant features. Sorry, Alex.
I was going to say, is the best looking and most dominant person in this office. I would say it's absolutely true. And shame on you all for sharing more information than you would with anybody else. If you don't believe me, ask my stock trading champion mug right here. So shame on you all. It's sad and disgusting. All right, that is it for episode 82 of Farm to Markets. We'll see you again next week.